Ref. Actually got the ball. Good evening, Tottenham fans, on this fine afternoon here in Ireland, and I think it's a great day in the UK as well. You know, Johnny had to, close the curtains over there and that, so it's absolutely fantastic weather. Hopefully you're all enjoying yourself. But we are here for the Power Hour this evening, and we will be talking ahead, building up to the game on Thursday. Big game, of course, against Frankfurt. I was reading the stat today. It's the first time we've reached this stage of a European competition since the Champions League run in 2019. So absolutely mad. So big game for Tottenham Hotspur this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the atmosphere as well, what to expect, the protest as well, and then we're going to have a good conversation on Brennan Johnson because, you know, there's two sides to the argument. A lot of people think he's not good enough. But then on the other side of the argument, you know, he's our club's top goal scorer. And I'd argue, you know, is there any other club that hate their top goal scorer as much as maybe the criticism that comes Brennan Johnson's way? So we have plenty to discuss this evening that we're going to get into. We're not going to waste any time. You know, people have plans this evening. So we're just going to crack on, get straight into it. I'll bring up the comments as we go through. So over to you, Jacko.
Yeah, let's get this going. Thanks to everybody that has joined us. Smash the like button, please. Also, if you are following us over on X, do follow us over here to YouTube, especially if you want to engage with some of the chat and some of the people in the house. But yeah, let's get this one started off. We're going to start first about Thursday night. Thursday night is the night we've all been waiting for. It's truly the time to see what Spurs are made of. We're going to kind of get things started off easy for you guys. Are you confident of a Spurs win, or are you maybe fearing for the worst? You know, have you been a fan that's been reading into the Chelsea performance, been reading into the Southampton performance as an indication of what could happen Thursday night? Or have you kind of just ignored the past two performances and have just been waiting to see what Spurs are made of on Thursday night? Johnny, go to you on this one. How deeply have you read into the last two performances in terms of what we'll get for Thursday night?
Listen, look, I go there with zero expectations, and like all games, we go in hope and just hope we don't leave in pieces. Look, the good thing is Frankfurt lost to Werder Bremen on the weekend, lost 2-0. Another couple of injuries. Knauf is missing. They've got a few. The keeper's missing. Kevin Trapp's out. Got a whole list. I think about 7 players that are missing from the team at the moment.
More injuries than us.
More injuries than us. The injury excuse, that ship has sailed and it's gone over the ocean, right? So we're a full-strength team playing at home from the Premier League. Results don't matter. Previous form doesn't matter. It's the cup game, right? We've seen the minnows beat the big teams. We've seen so-called no-hopers beat the other side. So for us to go in there and say we got no hope is nonsensical with the likes of Mickey van de Ven, Romero, and a full-strength team, because we have, barring Kulu, we have a full-strength squad, a full-strength team. There is no excuses. Basically, I think the players will lift themselves. We could win this despite Ange Postecoglou, right, not because of him. I haven't seen us fired up for Fulham. I didn't see us fired up in a game against Southampton. But self-motivation will be the key on Thursday. European night, in front of the European cameras, all the European boys with their families watching at home, everyone on the telly. It's their chance to shine, chance to put themselves in the shop window. Romero, Porro, and whoever else wants to leave. I don't think anything needs to be said. The fight will be there. The determination will be there. The issue is, if they follow Ange Postecoglou's tactics, will we have a chance? There lies the issue. But we have to come away with at least a 2-0 win. I'm going to Germany next Thursday. Oh, wow. I will be devastated. I'll be devastated if I'm going there like 2-0 down. I'll just go over there for some Frankfurters and some beers and forget about the rest.
Well, Johnny, just as a follow-up, I mean, I know you have your doubts, of course, with Ange Postecoglou and the tactics and whatnot, but could a victory over Frankfurt this Thursday night repair maybe the rift that Spurs fans have with Ange, just with the club in general? Daniel Levy, of course, plenty of frustrations there. I mean, how much of a boost could a win be for this fan base this Thursday night? Of course, you still need to get the job done in the second leg, but I don't know about you. Maybe this is the happy clapper in me, but I feel like a win this Thursday night would do a lot of good for this fan base for right now.
Listen, one swallow doesn't make a summer, right? I would say that everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to win. However much I dislike Ange Postecoglou, and I think he's clueless tactically and been exposed. I'm looking at Southampton. We're 2-1 against Southampton in the 90th minute against the worst team to play in the Premier League. We played Leicester this season. We scored 2 goals. They've conceded 67. They haven't kept a clean sheet in the last 10 games. And, I look at that 1 point from Leicester, losing to Ipswich, it's not good. It's not good. So I would say that obviously a win is great for everybody. And whatever your affiliation or thoughts on Ange Postecoglou, you want to be coming away there with a win and going off to Germany with optimism. And, I think this fan base, with what it's gone through over the last 12 months, deserves a happy ending. And wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if the scum from down the road got done tonight and next week, and somehow we went through,
did our business on Thursday?
Because all I've had, I'm sure all the Tottenham fans who've got Arsenal mates have had St Tottenham's Day last week. All the emails. Their season's going to be over, right? So it would be great if ours is continuing to the semi-final. So let's hope.
Same. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
No, what I will say is, look, I fully understand what Jonny is saying. And look, I don't think many fans have took any confidence from that Chelsea game, from the Southampton game. But to a large degree, in that Chelsea game, I did see a team that were trying out there. Again, the Southampton game, I did see a team that was trying out there. I just think a lot of it comes down to the confidence at the end of the day and the quality. Do we have the quality on the night? Look, we have pulled performances out of our ass this season. We've done Man United in the cup. We've done Man City. We've done Man City in the league, Man United in the league. We've pulled some performance out of our asses this season. And it's not beyond the realms of impossibility that we can do that again. Look, the reality is, the way I look at this tie is, I agree with Jonny. We have to do this in the home leg. You look at our away legs this season in the Europa League, we haven't fared too well away from home. Fenerbahce, it was the team we played out in Turkey.
Galatasaray,
Rangers, AZ, there's a common theme, but that stretch was back under Nuno. We lost games underneath him, Patros Tafera, teams like that. Enes Moura underneath Antonio Conte, Jose Mourinho. We went away in the second leg where we were up going into Dynamo Zagreb. We got knocked out of the last 16. We got turned over that night. So this game is all about the home leg. We have to do well in the home leg to overcome this. If we don't go out there with anything to sort of hold on to, I think it's going to be a very, very tricky evening. And I just hope the players and the manager realize this, that throw caution to the wind. You have to go for it at home. And there's no point of trying to sit in tight and take it to the away leg. We know we don't have the characters to stand up away from home in that sort of degree. We played these a couple of years ago. I think we drew at home 0-0. I think we bet them away 3-2. But I think Son scored 2 that night and Kane scored 1. They were in prime. We can't rely on them individuals this time around. So, we are relying on a couple of players to really pull a rabbit out of that hat here. You're talking about your Maddison and your Son really to turn up on the night together, not one or the other. You need multiple players to step up, but we have to go for this at home. And I do think we have to realize, this isn't beyond the realms of impossibility. Yes, it was always billed as a difficult task. But you look at their Bundesliga form, I know they're sitting third right now, but they're not in great form. Ever since they sold Mamouche, they've had a serious problem. Don't get me wrong, they've got some good players in the way they play. They sit back, counter us. It's a lot of the games that we've lost this year, to a degree, the way they play. But this isn't beyond the realms of impossibility. There's no better feeling. I was looking at Gareth Bale's highlights there, against Inter Milan and stuff like that, And, there's no better feeling than watching Tottenham, Glenn Hoddle on commentary and stuff like that. These are the nights that we're up for. But, I would even argue this isn't even a game where Ange should even have to worry about motivation for these players. These players should be self-motivated for this game. They don't need Ange putting together highlight reels, using the family as motivation and stuff like that. This should be self-motivating for a lot of these individuals. That second half against Southampton, I weigh it up. How much of it is down to a tactical instruction from Postecoglou, and how much is it to the players individually taking their foot off the gas? But the reality is, through team selections and some of the performances, it's clear that everyone combined, manager and players, have all took their foot off the gas for these European games. So they have to turn up tomorrow night. They've put themselves in this position where there's so much weight behind this, but they have to turn up Thursday night against Frankfurt. They have to. We still have a chance. I know the way the season has gone, but our cup runs this season, League Cup, Europa League, they've been decent enough. We've still got a fighting hope. This is our last hope this season, and I'm going to cling on to it, and hopefully I'm not disappointed.
I want to throw this one at you, Dave, and then, of course, I want Jonny and Sam to respond to it, but something Jonny did say.
Can I just throw in, Dave, right? The one thing is about this Frankfurt team, that looking at their tactics and how they set up, I spent like a week, 10 days looking at it. And it seems the one thing they struggle with, ironically, is a low block, right? Now, if we set up, I can't see it happening, but if we set up a low block, they seem to struggle against the low block and the counter, right? That's where we are quite strong with the pace that we would have with Tell and the rest of them. But where they are massively strong is transitions. And, you know, if we come out there to play them at their own game, that's where I fear we could have a problem. And this is where I would love to see Ange come out and say, you know what, I know how to beat them, and I'm going to change it up tonight, and we're going to go low. I can't see it happening, but
it's just not.
I did not say that at all. That's not what
I was going to ask about this, though, Jonny, too. Maybe I don't think you phrased it in that way. The way I heard you phrase it, this is just my ears and my ears only. The way I heard you phrase it was the players have to take some accountability themselves where they are good enough to win it despite, you know, the tactics or whatever, right? They should be able to get the job done themselves with their own individual quality and also their own effort levels, right? This is the game that's been built for weeks now. They should be building themselves up for it. They should be very self-motivated for this game. I think that's what you were alluding to. Like, regardless of whether you or I or anyone believes in these tactics, you know, where we stand on that, these players, in terms of paper, you know, on quality, the paper on the team, they should be able to get the job done. They should be able to be good enough to beat this Frankfurt team. I think that's what you sort of meant.
Yeah, same as what Dave said. They should be self-motivated. They should not need any motivation. The motivation and the drive that's maybe been lacking in the last few games. For this game, you should be coming out here so fired up. I'm fired up, right? And I'm not playing, right? So they should be fired up for what's coming on Thursday, right? No motivation. This is what being a footballer is all about. Quarterfinal, semi-final, big European nights is what you dream of as a footballer. And therefore, Ange shouldn't need to do anything other than to set out the tactics on potentially how to beat them. So there's a misunderstanding. That's not what I meant at all.
How did you hear it, Sam? How did you hear it?
I apologize. You said if that's not what you meant, fair enough.
Yeah. I don't think there's really any big reason to apologize. I mean, Sam, how did you hear Sonny? Not Sonny. Jonny meant that. You know, did you feel like he was saying, you know, the players should be good enough, you know, and be self-motivated enough to beat Frankfurt almost on their own, regardless of what the manager is telling them beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, I basically heard one thing Jonny said, and then I couldn't think about anything else. He said, the fight will be there. And I'm just wondering where you got that, because
Really Toots question on that here as well.
Plucked it out the air.
Yeah, well, because, you know, how many games this season have we gone into it? You know, the most recent one being the last round of the Europa League. You know, the first game. We've had an abysmal season. Like, I don't think anyone can say otherwise. You know, it feels like an eternity since we were knocked out of those cups. You know, that was a week from hell. But every time we go into these games, it's like we just can't wake up. And it takes me back to the Arsenal game when we played them at the Emirates, and it's like you can see only one team thinks this is a derby. And you wonder how many more wake up calls the team, the manager, the club need to actually think, let's get some fire in our bellies and actually go for this game.
Did you get that vibe from the Chelsea game that they were up for it? I felt like, Dave and I were in the opinion that they were trying. It's just they weren't very good. Is kind of the big difference.
I don't know. I mean, personally, I think I haven't seen us try in any games this season, at least lately. That Chelsea game for me, if Chelsea were actually a decent team at the moment, we'd have been 5-0 down by halftime. We almost concede a minute into the game or whatever with that Nicholas Jackson thing. And to Johnny's point about how Frankfurt play, I can't say that I watch a healthy amount of Bundesliga, but I'm watching the worst team in the league play one ball from their goalkeeper to their striker, basically, and creating a chance. Any team who's worth anything, and no disrespect to Southampton, but they are the worst team in Premier League history at the moment. Any team that's worth anything will play long balls over the top of us. And the way that we're set up, whether you think it's a fullback problem, I personally think it's a mix of the fullback and the midfield. Because against Chelsea, against Fulham, against Southampton, and any of these games, you're just watching 3-on-1s develop against the fullback, mostly down Porro's side. I don't know if that's because he's the more inverted of the two, but you don't see the midfield offering any help. And I can't, to answer your original question about how I feel about the game.
Yeah,
I think we'll win the home game. I don't really see any other result personally, but my problem is, are we going to win it convincingly enough to go to a place where we've heard that they've got one of the best fan bases in Europe this season? And I remember going to that Galatasaray game, not going to the game, but we went to their stadium, welcome to hell, and all of our players shied. Now I will caveat that a little bit and say that obviously that was very early on in both Gray and Bergval's careers for us. And I will hold my hands up and say at that time, I did say after that game, I thought, wow, Bergval, as much as he looks really good, I think he needs to go on loan because I don't know if it's working yet.
Yeah.
Obviously he's young, but since then, he's been the only player who's shown any bollocks, right? And every game, I mean, the reason that he was booed, that Ange was booed in the Chelsea game, I don't personally think was because of Sarr. I think it was because people were looking at it like, why are you taking Bergval off, who's the only person taking the ball in the midfield and actually looking to drive at players? It was the same against Southampton. So I've said, the atmosphere will be big, but the players like Bergval, and as crazy as it is to say, a 19-year-old will look at that game and will go for it. And hopefully other players are. Look, Brennan obviously has some confidence from the last game. And he's needed that because I feel like it's been a while since he's actually done anything of note. And that's not me saying that I hate Brennan. I've never hated Brennan.
We'll get on to Brennan Johnson. We've got that coming further down the line, lad.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, but there's players that should take some confidence in the Southampton game. Although personally, I finished watching that game maybe as angry as I've been through some of the losses, just feeling like this week we've had Chelsea where we've lost 1-0. 1-0 is not the end of the world, but just I felt like other than that Son chance, we weren't looking like we were going to score. And then to not go and rout Southampton. And look, I wasn't asking for like a 7-0 game, but I was hoping that we'd go out there and put the game to bed in the first half, which, we got halfway there. I'm not here to say that we didn't play well in the first half because I thought we did. But it popped up like 70 minutes into the game that they had 70-odd% possession since the start of the second half. I mean, how can you take confidence from that? I mean, it's very.
Well,
Sounds like you were reading, pretty deeply then into some of the recent games, and I think plenty of Spurs fans have been, Sam, and that was part of the question. Yeah.
what I will say just quickly is, I think we got to learn our lessons from that Liverpool two-legged tie in the Carabao Cup semi-final. We only took one with us, to their place. Pedro Porro missed an absolute sitter. We didn't take enough of our chances on the day. To a degree, it was the same against Southampton. We didn't take enough chances in the first half when we were in ascendancy. Against Chelsea, we had a chance right at the end, didn't take it. This is a common theme of Tottenham's season. We don't take enough chances or produce enough quality in the final third. But I just hope there's lessons learned from that Liverpool game, because I think we all got the sinking feeling when Porro missed that sitter that we were sort of sitting there thinking, oh, this could come back to bite us. And in reality, it did. So 1-0 isn't going to be enough going away from home. We have a serious problem going away from home. Our away form in the Premier League, in London derbies, in Europe, in cup competitions, it's absolutely atrocious. So we have to learn lessons, and we have to go at them this game. And I would say for the 90 minutes, not pick and choose what half you want to go and play football. But I think we need to get on to Blaine. He's gifted out 5 channel memberships. Very kind of him.
Ryan G's been gifted one. Lee Glover's been gifted one. NC17 Stu, N17 Stu, Gon's Football and Things, and then Liston Heinz. And I think a couple of those maybe have made a debut on the channel before. So would love to see you guys back on. The last fan show was a little bit busier, but would love to see some more people on maybe after we get that hopeful win against Frankfurt on Thursday night. So thank you very much, Super Spurs. Thank you very much, Blaine. Really do appreciate it. And everybody take advantage of it. Also, members preview tomorrow night ahead of our massive game Thursday night. And then Phil P's in the house as well, saying Spurs should be fired up like me in the pub with Johnny. Phil P is a good person to be around.
He's a good man.
I was with
Phil.
Up for it. Yeah, I was with Phil on Sunday. Feels like ages ago. Phil, I hope you're well, mate. Yeah, always there, ready for action is Phil.
Hope he's not well in the head too. He has a good sense of humor, even when Spurs are doing poorly. He has a good sense of humor, I think, about it. The guy knows how to ride the ups and downs, which that's why I enjoyed about hanging out with Phil, is that he has a good sense of levity, over the situation. Dave, though, I just wanted to ask that question that's in the title, though, to you. Can a victory over Frankfurt repair maybe the rift that Spurs fans have with Ange Postecoglou, with the club in general, with Daniel Levy, right? The mood is slightly still a bit sour, from the outside looking in. I mean, can a win this Thursday night get people happy clapping again to some degree?
I think, look, a win keeps the belief and the hope alive, right? To a degree, I think the Premier League games now is where all the tension's coming in around. I think the cup games, I think in general, people are willing to put their feelings aside, get in there, create a good atmosphere, and try and, will this team on. And I think in cup competitions, many people are up for the games. It's the league where the problem is coming in and where the friction is coming in, because we're at the point now where we're prioritizing one competition over another. And, many fans are pissed off where we are in the Premier League. Many fans want to try and, win as many games as we can in that and save face. But I'll be honest, I think the only way, he buys goodwill is if he goes and wins the competition. He delivers something that no one thought he could. And I think then people may have to reevaluate where they were with Ange Postecoglou and give him that opportunity. But to be honest, I think he's done the damage himself, Jack. And what I mean by that is, it's clear the club are willing to keep him in and back him. They may have different reasons on why they've done it and stuff. It's clear that the players are still happy, in my opinion, playing underneath him. Many players have come out, said they haven't asked to change the way they're playing. They're happy that Ange is taking all the responsibility in the press conferences and all that sort of stuff. But he's gone against the fans, and that for me is irreparable. I'm not sure he's ever going to come back from that. And I'll be honest, once you lose the Tottenham away fans, you're done. You're absolutely done out here. And I think that's where the situation is always going to be irretrievable, because even if he does deliver a Europa League title going into next season, there's going to be such short rope with Ange Postecoglou. Everything he does is going to be scrutinized. If we lose games, he's going to be scrutinized to a large degree. So I think to a degree, he's probably made a rod off his own back with the friction with the fan base, since he's been here. And I think that's where ultimately this will come to an end.
I think Sebas is agreeing with you, saying it can't not and it should not. Just a simple win on Thursday night. So let us know, everybody in the chat, if you'd agree with Sebas, if you agree with Dave that perhaps a lot of damage has been done, this year with Ange and the fans, of course, Daniel Levy with the fans. Like, does one win against Frankfurt, lift the whole fan base? For me, it probably would, because I'm just a sucker at the end of the day. I take a win against Southampton, and I would absolutely take a win against Frankfurt. My mood would be absolutely lifted, but does it repair any of the damage and the rift that's, gone on this season? I think that is a bit of a deeper question there. Did anybody have any follow-ups, to that? PH family becoming a Flat Cap member. Thank you very much, PH. I think you've been with us for a long time now, my friend. But I mean, anybody want to comment on that, Sam or Johnny? Just, is the damage been done, between Ange, Daniel Levy with the fan base? Does a win over Frankfurt repair the mood at all, or is kind of, it's been broken already?
Listen, for me, right, as just one fan, I'm just speaking on my behalf. The effort that it takes to go to these away games, the amount of time and effort, to have a manager say that he doesn't really care and it's water off a duck's back and he's long in the tooth, to then see him calling out the fans. He called out the fans against Man City last season, but wasn't bothered. When asked about the big game against Arsenal prior to that, he said, all the games are the same to me, right? Well, obviously you don't understand how big this is, Why didn't you have that upset when we were playing Arsenal? Why no that determination? Why were you being upset? Why were you more determined to beat Pep Guardiola's team than you were to beat Arsenal? The going down the tunnel, the home game where he came back to confront a fan. The away game, was it Bournemouth away? I'm trying to think, where he went over to the fans and wanted to have an argument with them there. The Fulham game, it's too much. It's too much. Do not confront the fans, right? These are the guys that go home and away. You just don't do it. You just don't do it. If it was a one-off incident, right, fair enough. Emotions can get the better of you. But, telling us that Arsenal didn't matter last season and it's just the same as any other game, and then getting upset, right, when we don't give a shit about Manchester City. What was the game, Dave? Was it at White Hart, the Tottenham Stadium, where he's coming down the tunnel and he's gone back to confront someone said something?
I've lost track of the amount of times he's done that at this stage.
Yeah, the Bournemouth away game. Wasn't it Bournemouth away where he went?
I think the Bournemouth away one was a bit different. I think
Fulham.
someone was like calling him like a fat cunt or something like that.
Right, okay.
I think there was one of them that was a little bit different, but the majority of them, he sort of like, I'm not being funny. How many managers and players have we had that just sort of ignore that and just go straight down the tunnel? And I think he'd be just to be the bigger person. At the end of the day, I understand if you, as an individual, if someone's antagonizing me, I'm also going to antagonize them. But I'm not manager of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. I'm representing myself. He's representing an entire, millions of people.
Bigger than him.
The football club. And he needs to realize that, and really needs to realize he needs to be bigger than that,
Yeah. Pay $5 million a year on top of it. And going to get a nice bonus when he gets sacked. Right? Yeah. Take it inside. What I keep hearing is this philosophy that he gives, post-game, where nothing bothers me, jovial chat, I'm too long in the tooth and all the rest of it. You give it all the chat, and then when someone says something you don't like, you react.
Yeah. Well,
it's contradiction.
I have a question to you lads on the atmosphere that we need to generate Thursday night, and since you guys do get to go to the games, I'm just curious of maybe what you sort of think, the atmosphere will be like, because we do need a raucous atmosphere to push on these players, to push on the fans, to give ourselves that belief, that we can get over the line. Should the fans put aside their frustrations around Ange and Levy and create just a loud, positive atmosphere for the players? I know Daniel Levy in that recent financial statement sort of alluded to that, saying he just wants people to get behind the team, get behind the players for this massive, massive game. So how do we expect the Thursday night atmosphere to be? Do you think it will be improved maybe from recent games? Will fans be up for this? Will fans just sort of put aside frustrations, put aside some of these feelings and get up for it? Or do you think the atmosphere could end up being still a little bit dead? Anyone can come in, Sam or Johnny. Yeah.
I think that it's a bit of a taboo. I don't know how you feel, Johnny, about it. I feel like at the start of every game I've been to, at least for the first 10 to 20 minutes, the atmosphere's up. People are cheering and they're willing on the team. But the same thing happens in every game where there's a mistake, someone misplaces a pass, there's a few groans, and that sets the tone because of the mentality of the players and also the club in general. And then the fans just like, and this is not a criticism of the fans. I think that these
Sean's saying they respond to the football. They respond to the things that are happening. That's what changes the mood.
It goes hand in hand, right? You know, the fans at the start of the game, my point is they try and G the team up to start going. And then all of a sudden the performance slips and you can feel the shift, and all of a sudden the away fans start to get louder. And you know, let's be honest, away fans are always generate a lot more noise proportionally to the home fans. You know, the home fans, I'm not talking about just Spurs, I'm talking about
it's a football
away
thing
fans
in general.
and home fans in general. Yeah, because these away fans are the hardcore fans for the most part. You know,
they
people offer the ticket or whatever.
Yeah.
But as I said, like, I think it's disingenuous especially for Levy to be saying it, considering how little he's actually offered to us in terms of actually trying to build something special. You know, he does the bare minimum, and I don't want to get too bogged down into the whole Levy thing.
I'll get bogged down in it. No problem. Listen, Sam, listen, at the end of the day, right? You want to be a winner? Go out there and spunk some money, right? Big game. Get some flags in, right? Not hand out 5 potsy flags to some kids to go like that with. It's embarrassing, right? Get some pyrotechnics. Forget the bloody CD that comes out. They whack in. Oh,
what about the trumpet?
Whack in the CD, right, and play the same tune every time, right? Nothing changes. It's the same stuff.
Well, Johnny, some would argue that Levy is doing, you know, he's got the trumpet guy involved, you know, they're allowing a drum in the south stand and stuff like that. Some would argue.
When?
You know, did they not say that you know, there wasn't there a ban on a drum or something, and now that they're allowing, they've allowed, you know,
I've not seen. I've got to be honest with you.
Could be wrong on that. But, you know, some would argue, you know, they're trying.
Listen, the only trumpet he blows is his own, right? I think for me, the atmosphere in that south stand was designed to replicate the yellow wall at Borussia Dortmund, right? And if you've been to Borussia Dortmund, that's a proper atmosphere, okay? I go to Crystal Palace, there's better atmosphere, okay? Than coming to us. It needs to be. I know the football, we do feed off the football, but I just think that really there are things that they could do. There are things that they could do. A drummer, because they don't want the fans to say the Y word, okay? That's what it's all about. Okay. That's on the beat. But
should Levy get rid of the Star Wars music and things like that? Just sort of let the fans just sort of raise, you know, because if he just gave it a bit of silence, you know, they would raise the atmosphere themselves, you know, with various Spurs chants, wouldn't they?
I'd take Neil Diamond right now. I'd take anything, right? Just that. Let's have a signature tune, right? Let's try something, right? Okay. I just think that it's stale at the moment. We know that the lights are going to come on and they go shh, like this. It's going to be the same track on the CD. Nothing's going to change. You know, I'll take it all back if there's a flag on my seat when I get there. Spend some money. Like, you know, you look at the Newcastle game in the Cup and the semi-final, I think it was. They all had, you know, create the atmosphere. Do something. Ramp up the microphone to elevate that noise. Use every trick in the book. Stick some microphones in the south stand to amplify the noise. Do what you need to do. Take every available thing you have at your disposal to eat that bit of advantage, because we need to do that. The fans need to be behind them, and we will be. We will be behind them on Thursday, but the club needs to do their bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I'm one of them. I don't think the club do enough. I think they're trying to a certain degree, but I just think they're misreading the room to a large degree. I think the big games, you want to do all your lights and all that, fine. You don't have to have the music on. Let the Spurs fans sing. Let us generate the atmosphere. Well, not us, but the likes of the boys down there, who do get to the stadium and stuff. Let them generate the atmosphere. I was there at the North London Derby last year, and they've got the trumpet guy up there, and it's completely killed the atmosphere before the games even got going. It's absolutely madness. There was a group, what was it, 1882 or something like that? There was a group that was trying to organise stuff and try and liaise with the club. Spurs song sheets have tried and stuff like that, and they just will not meet them halfway. They don't do enough to help people that are trying. Look, we're not the only club with this problem. You look at if anyone watches the Burnley documentary, there was a segment, part of that was dedicated to them trying to boost the atmosphere and stuff like that when things aren't going well, and they were trying to do it by playing music, trying to change the tempo of the music and stuff like that. But for me, I think they get it wrong. Like at Tottenham, from my experience, no matter the circumstances around Tottenham heading into the big games, Spurs fans has always sung their bloody hearts out. It's the smaller games, where I do think maybe they need to do a little bit more in that regard to try and boost the atmosphere. I'm okay with that. But the bigger games, I just think they get it all wrong. Too busy with loud music, this, that, and the other. Like Johnny said, we got a big, massive South Stand tifos. Let's not forget when they built this stadium, they put in acoustics and all that sort of stuff to reverberate the noise from the fans back into the stadium to maximize all this. It was all that planning when they built the stadium. But it's not matching up with the lengths that the board and the club are willing to go to help, maximize that. So then it's sort of left the question of, well, then what's the point of putting that in? At the end of the day, they have to understand we've been in a certain cycle for 5 to 6 years now that we can't get out of. They can't expect people to turn up every game and just blindly sing and everything else. So therefore they have to go a longer way to stretch to meet these fans and work with groups of fans to try and get this sort of stuff going. If you think Newcastle ain't liaising with their fans to get all that stuff for the organised for the final and all, of course they are. It happens at lower league clubs when they're trying to generate atmospheres to get fans involved in early to put the stuff out on the seats and stuff. There's ways it can be done. But, time and time again, Daniel Levy doesn't really want to stretch to the fans halfway and even meet them. He always notoriously makes these things difficult. But in terms of big games, we will turn up. It's just everything else they try to put on overshadows that.
Have you heard Forest? I mean, listen to Forest, Nottingham Forest. Even at half-time, when they come back at half-time, the fans are like, they're playing the music, but the whole stadium is singing. The whole, yes, they're winning, right? Yes, that changes the whole mindset of the fan base. Agreed. But they are moving heaven and earth to encompass it. And the Newcastle game wasn't just that final. Look at some of the big European games they've had. The way the owners have tried to lift it all up and to get things going.
So it is kind of more of an ownership thing. It's kind of they have more influence on it than really anybody else. It sounds like,
Well,
forget I'm hearing from both you and Sam.
Yeah, forget can Beyonce play up front? Can we borrow Beyonce to sing up front on Thursday? Get on the podium and give it some welly, singing some Tottenham classics. She can be the Beyonce's new Chaz and Dave.
I mean, Sam, I think final point, on that, just that I just said to Johnny, it sounds like you guys are both kind of saying it's really Daniel Levy who bears the most responsibility and the ownership for generating the atmosphere, or at least trying to influence a good atmosphere at the end of the day. Even PH Family saying, keep it simple, don't push it too much, forget the lights and the Star Wars music. Let's just have singing groups in the crowd, put flags on the seats, have plants in the crowd leading the chants. And even as well, I think Phil P saying Spirit of the Shelf was a singing group that they needed to incorporate as well. The drummer could be incorporated. So these are all things that are kind of within Daniel. These are Daniel Levy's control. These are things within his control.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, nobody shits on Jewel of the Face. I will not accept that. But, I think that ultimately there was a period in my Spurs fandom where, I was overly proud to be a Spurs fan. We were pushing, we were fighting on all fronts. There was, real men in the squad that were actually putting everything on the line every game, the likes of your Jan Vertonghen, for example. And now I look at it and I wonder if players want to be there. And I don't feel proud to be a Spurs fan. I don't think many of us feel proud to be a Spurs fan at the moment. You might still like. I'm not saying I don't love the club. I do love the club, but I'm not exactly out there publicizing. I still wear my merch and everything, but I'm not out there publicizing to like anyone that will hear it. Like, I'm a Tottenham fan. I love losing 16 games in the Premier League season, and potentially more. And I'm seeing NJ Marquez's comments in the chat, and it's like you're making points about Sporting Lisbon. Like, Sporting Lisbon win titles. Their fans are proud. Like, at the moment, we're not. And
I suppose what he's trying to ask is, could people at the ground, maybe do a bit more when the team are down, still sort of sing and stuff. I think that's what he's trying to get across.
It's a lie to say that there isn't an atmosphere when we're losing, because we're losing all the time. So then there'll just be no atmosphere. Like, it might not be as long as prolonged as it, maybe people want it to be. And maybe that's to do with, the day trippers who are going there. And when I say day trippers, I'm not talking about the supposed, like, the foreign fans that people complain about. I don't have
like me. You talk about me, I'd be a day tripper.
Yeah, no, but I mean people who go
like day for foreigner
game.
Yeah. Sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
I'm talking about people that go just because it's a football game. It's like, oh, I'm in London, I'll go to a football game. They're just there to, like, for the spectacle, not to support the team. Like, I've got nothing against fans from other countries coming, because as I've said about you guys, you're waking up at stupid o'clock in the morning or going to bed like ridiculously late just so that you can follow the club, right? And follow the shit that we've been served on a plate all season and for a year, let's be honest. I think, yes, the atmosphere could be better, right? I'm not here saying we've got the best atmosphere in the land, because we all know that we don't. And yes, that I've seen a lot of this stuff, like Spurs song sheet saying that they worked with the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust to try and get these singing sections. And I don't know how realistic these singing sections are, because I people have their seats. You can't necessarily just oust people, but there's definitely things that the club could do that they clearly don't care about even brainstorming, because that's not selling £8 pints or whatever in the stands and £4 packets of Haribos. You know what I mean?
Good point.
It all comes down to money in the end, and the incentive is not there for the club.
They're not even experimenting, it seems like. Even if they feel like it doesn't work out, at least you tried something.
Do you know what would work? I was just going to say, what would work? If you look at all the big clubs in Italy, in South America, in fact, most of the big clubs in Europe, they have a conductor at the front. Even at AZ Alkmaar, right? They have two guys at the front with a megaphone.
Yeah.
Right? They stand in front, facing the fans, and they are the ones calling the tunes. They are the ones that are lifting the fans, and they all dance to the tune. And it needs someone conducting. Imagine like three guys at the front, like the leaders. We don't have a captain on the pitch. We don't have a captain in the singing section. So it might be something that they could look at to drive up the atmosphere. It ain't going to happen before Thursday. So on Thursday, the fans will do their bit, but it's up to the players to turn up and do their bit.
Give you something to believe in.
To motivate the fans, because if they turn up on Thursday and deliver what we're all hoping they deliver, then the atmosphere will come with it. It's as simple as that.
My favorite suggestion. Yeah, go ahead, Sam. We cut you off.
I just wanted, because you made one point about the conductor. I'm not sure necessarily the club could do that, but I do agree with you on that, because I was lucky enough to sit in hospitality for one game based on some work that I'd done with a partner of Spurs. And that was for the Elfsborg game. And I was with my brother, and I kept saying to him, look at this guy, like right at the front of the Elfsborg's fans. He literally hasn't watched a minute of the game. He is literally like conducting this whole thing. And that, this isn't just like, you've gone to a local rival. This is you've bought tickets to fly from Sweden to go to another country and pay. You know, I think we still have some of the most expensive tickets for European away fans. So you spent all this money to get to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and you love your club so much that you're not even bothered about watching the game. You're trying to build the atmosphere for the team to try and do something. It's commendable. I'm not sure that the club could necessarily do that.
No, that's not on them. Yeah,
that would take someone to do it.
The ultras. It's the ultras. These
exactly. But we don't, as you say, we don't have an ultras section, so you're not going to have like you're going to have some random geezer. Like let's be honest. There always is some random guy. You're watching the game and all of a sudden, like, your eardrums burst because the guy behind you is like screaming the Spurs songs because he's had a few too many drinks. But that's the kind of stuff you love when you go to games. As annoying as it can be, like, that one geezer just absolutely belting it out. He's the kind of guy that you'd see in the Newcastle crowd. He'd be with his top off, you know.
We want that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I went to but when I used to go to the game, I was in this ground at 1 o'clock and we were singing at 1 o'clock, right? The game didn't start till 3. You know, we used to sing and, like, you know, there was passion. It used to be the game was just about the football. It wasn't about finance. It wasn't about TV rights. It wasn't about were you on TV that weekend. It was just about getting on the train, going out to the stadium, paying your money, going in, getting your peanuts, right, and your beer, and
wanting to see your team win.
Wanting to see your team win. You know, and think at the moment, you know, it's become sanitized, and because of that sanitization of corporate, corporate football, boxes, and all the rest of it, it seems to have killed a lot of the atmosphere in football. It's not just our ground. Saying that, you know, as I said before, Crystal Palace have great atmosphere at their stadium. Forest have a great atmosphere at their stadium. And I think ours sucks at the moment. It really does.
Well, Jonny, I know you only have so much time left. So we did put in your Twitter as well as your Instagram. But I did want to ask you just quickly before you go, and we'll get a longer answer from Sam on this. It's part of the title of the stream, so we did have to ask you. Brennan Johnson has reached 10-plus goals in the Premier League before any other Spurs player this season. He's a very divisive player at Tottenham at the moment and does receive a lot of criticism from people like myself and Dave. Is that criticism justified, or do the stats speak for themselves and we should lay off of him?
Look, it's a real hard one. When he arrived, I called him Brendan Johnson because he was so soft. And, you know, watching him have the ball ripped away from him for that penalty on Sunday, I think he was soft. You know, you would have to literally fight me to get that ball off of me. I would have stuffed out my jumper and I ain't giving it back, right? And I'd be taking the penalty. Look, you know, I thought both goals were lovely goals, 2 well-taken goals. The first one hit it beautifully, and the second goal was a lovely touch. We have to remember he's 23 years of age. The parts of his game which really frustrate me, he doesn't take on his man, right? He doesn't take on his man, and he's not aggressive enough in the tackle. If he could somehow sort that out, you know, it's hard. You know, I'm not his biggest fan, but you can't argue with his goals, the amount of tap-ins and what have you. But if he can find that aggression, and he's still on the journey, as I said, 23 years of age. If we had someone come through our academy who was 23, who had scored 16 goals for us this season at 23 years of age, we'd be singing a different tune. I sit on the fence. Long may continue to score the goals, and the more he scores, the more he will retain his value to us and the club. So I'm going to sit on the fence. I'm not his biggest fan. My boys always give me a hard time because I always say he's rubbish. But, you know, 2 very well taken goals on the weekend. So I'll take my hat off to him. Will he start on Thursday? I don't think so. I think you've got to start Odegaard and Son, personally, but we shall see.
All right. And Jonny, I know I don't want to make, like, we always seem to get you in trouble with the misses every week, so maybe this time, maybe slightly less so. Plug your Twitter and plug your socials, please.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. So I'm Jonny H 3232 on Insta, on Twitter and on Instagram and TikTok. It's Talking Tottenham 1882. So give us a follow there if you're on Instagram or on TikTok. Guys, thanks very much for having us, and hopefully when I see you next week, we'll be discussing a win against Frankfurt, a win against Wolves. I'm actually looking forward more to the curry after the game. Curry place after the Wolves game than I am watching the game. But thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, Johnny.
And I will see you guys next week. Guys,
see you next week. Enjoy yourself Thursday night.
Enjoy the trip.
Take care. See you.
See you, man. Bye-bye.
Dave and I were even joking that, the takeaway, businesses have not been doing so well with Spurs this year, because that's how much people have been in a tough mood. Question to you, Sam, so we can have a deeper conversation about it. I mean, Johnson, right? Stats speak for themselves. He should probably not be criticized as much, or is there a bit of gray area there, where, we're kind of only looking at the stats and maybe not the seeing eye? Where do you stand with Brennan Johnson? Because he's such a divisive player at Tottenham, despite being technically the club's top scorer in the Premier League.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you guys can attest. I've actually been fairly I've had quite a decent praise for Johnson since he's joined. I've always said I don't think he's as bad as everyone sort of makes out. That's not high praise, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want someone to be saying that about me, like, he's not that bad, But at the same time, I do think he is over critiqued. I laugh because I know that you always say, Jack, that invert the wing is just ChatGPT, someone's ChatGPT feed. But he did make that tweet earlier today, which I was sitting there thinking and he said, imagine hating your top scorer like as much as the Spurs fans hate Brennan, basically. And I don't know, I think I've also sort of maintained since I've been on the show with you guys that we're a scapegoating culture at the club. We have a very strong scapegoating culture. I thought the same about Højbjerg. I thought people gave him way too much of a hard time. And there's been a lot of other players throughout the years that I've felt the same way. And with Brennan, I understand and agree to a certain extent that, like, if he's not scoring, what is he doing? Right? But then they say the hardest thing in football is to score goals. And, it's not, I wouldn't say it's disingenuous, but his goals aren't all tap-ins. Like, I wouldn't actually say that either of the goals he scored against Southampton were tap-ins. That
they're great finishes.
A banger on his left foot as well. I think that it's just the fact that you kind of watch him and you think, like, just take your man on. I mean, admittedly, actually, in the Southampton game, he did take his man on a couple times, but my dad turned to me and said, like, that is typical of a player who just feels like you're playing against a championship quality team where you actually feel like you can do something. But when we actually play against teams where, they've got an established fullback, you didn't see anything against Chelsea of him taking on Cucurella, for example. And I don't even think the Cucurella is that good defensively. But with Brennan, I don't know if you want me to go into the penalty incident or you want to save that for a little bit.
I mean, if you feel like it's relevant, you're welcome to bring it up.
I think it leads to the mentality, right? Like I've seen a few people saying kind of a lot of contrasting things about it. Personally, for me, I actually respect Brennan a lot that he gave that up. People are saying they wanted to see more fight from him. Johnny's saying that, you'd have to wrestle that ball from his cold, dead hands, basically, to take that pen. But I'm looking at it, that I think that shows a very high level of maturity from such a young player. He's 23. He's not an old player. I know that, people look at it now and they're like, he's 23. He should be established. And the numbers are showing an established player. And I know that the eye test says slightly different. But for me, had he basically, been trying to fight with Romero, it would have been all over social media, like that Chelsea moment where Madueke, Jackson, and Palmer were all fighting for the pen. And it would have just been, a black mark against the day in general. And I think that Romero showed, a good. We don't know what the penalty rota is, right? But think Romero coming in and straight away kind of like deciding Tell's going to take this, I think that was important for us. Otherwise, maybe we would have ended up having that situation, because that people have seen that Brennan was going like this and like 3, like he was saying it's my hat trick, and he was clearly upset about it. Let's be honest. He didn't just take it with a smile. He's obviously upset, but he chose for the betterment of his fellow teammate to allow that. And I think that Tell did need that. I know people say he's a lone player, but I think he did need that goal, especially going into such a pivotal part of the season, to have the fact that you've scored 2 goals for your new club, and your first Premier League goal. That's confidence, regardless if it's a penalty and he earned that penalty or not. So I think that Johnson's maturity in that moment was a true testament to his character.
Just a quick follow-up to Sam, and then I'll let Dave go in on this one. I mean, plenty of people are having this debate. You can even see it in the chat right now. There are people who would say, oh, he needs to be played as a second striker, and just getting the most out of him. But then there are people like me and Dave who kind of feel like he's a very limited player, like he's a guy who can't even take on his man, doesn't work hard for the team, doesn't track back. Ange is technically maybe getting the most out of him, with the goals and the output that he's having in terms of the stats. So where do you lie on that spectrum there? Like, do you think Ange is getting the most out of Brennan Johnson given his ability, or do you think he's limiting Brennan Johnson?
I wouldn't necessarily say that he's getting the most, but I also would say he's getting quite a lot out of him. I think that Brennan's strength would be how we used to play Son and Kane. If you had a player, I know that most teams now, because of how we play, set up in a low block anyway. So what I'm saying is kind of null. But Brennan is rapid, right? And playing that ball over the top and allowing him to go one-on-one with the keeper. He might not score every time. His finishing's not as good as Son's. Let's be honest. I know Son's not showing that either. But he is obviously a good finisher. And I think that maybe the system doesn't quite suit him as much. But then, Ange gives that very high praise that Brennan is our most, what was the word that he used? It wasn't determined, but he basically just said like Brennan follows the game plan the most of any player in the squad, and gives his all to actually be where he needs to be. And look, I think that Brennan, he's like a nearly player, and now it's a pivotal time. 23. The next couple of years will be very crucial for him. I'm not sure how long he's got left on his contract, but I would assume it's about 3 years or something. The next year and a half for me is really important for Brennan's development as a player. And maybe a different coach could come in and turn him into a bit more of a take your man on kind of winger. I'm not sure, but we'll have to see. I think he can do it. The answer to the question is, will he do it?
Yeah, no, fair. No, I appreciate the balanced answer on that, Dave. I'll let you go in on this one. I mean, Brennan Johnson, do the stats speak for themselves? Do we need to lay off him, or is there some gray area there? Where it's a little bit deeper than the stats when it comes to this guy.
Look, Jack, you know me. I operate in fairness. Look, the reality is Brennan Johnson as bad as people say he is? No. But is he as good as people make him out to be? No. I think it's somewhere in the middle, to be quite frank. Look, 15 goal contributions last season, 20 this season. I think he's the first player outside of Son, Kane and Eriksen at Tottenham Hotspur, in quite some time to do that. So I think, yes, you've got to give him credit in that regard. And look, he's clearly become a very good player in terms of arriving in at the right place at the right time. I think Sky Sports Bellamy done a breakdown yesterday. I think, if Brennan Johnson is hitting that ball first time, he's got a higher finishing rate than when he takes a touch. It's when he starts taking touches of the football is a huge problem. Now, we can sit here and make the argument that Brennan Johnson's a striker. But the reality is, has anyone questioned why he's being moved out to the right wing? Because he's not a top half Premier League striker. He's just not. I'm sorry. He's never going to be. He's never going to have the physicality. He's never going to have the ability to be able to hold up the ball against a couple of big 6-foot guys and pass it off, especially if you're trying to be a possession-dominated team. He's never going to be a good enough striker to take us where we need to go. That's why he's being shifted out to the right-hand side. And that wouldn't just be at Tottenham. That'd be at any big club if they went to buy him, which they didn't, only we did. But they would also do the same. He is not good enough to play up front for where we want to go. But I always think, I was thinking about this today, and I think the judgment should be, and where we should never lose sight of, is the judgment should be, is he good enough, or is he going to be good enough in the future to take us where we need to go, which is meet our aspirations and what we want as a fan base, which is trophies. And I'll be honest, I look at Brennan Johnson, and that's where I don't think he will. Look, we can sit here and praise one aspect of his game, and, people could say, oh, but he puts points on the boards. But how many points have we suffered because he doesn't want to track back? He doesn't make tackles. He's slow on the press and stuff like that. There's a lot that he doesn't do that doesn't help Tottenham Hotspur, in terms of creating chances as well. Piss poor, beating his man, piss poor, consistently putting crosses in the box, absolutely piss poor. And at the end of the day, we can praise Brennan Johnson for one thing, but we should never lose sight of what he doesn't do. And for me, there's so many areas that he could, if he can improve on, he will become a very good player. But the reality is, we can sit here and praise he's the club's top goal scorer, but that's not a good indictment of Tottenham Hotspur. That shows we to a degree, we deserve to be where we are when he's our top scorer. That is a bad indictment of Tottenham Hotspur, the summer business, and everything else we've brought in across that front line, that this guy is the club's top scorer. It's not a good indictment of the club. Look, my opinion is, I think there's so much lack, and I think he lacks the aggression as well for the real big games. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a good squad player. He has nailed down that element of arriving in at the right place, scoring goals, which every squad is made up of different things, different components and stuff like that. So I think, he's probably proven to me that he's good enough to be a squad player moving forward. But we need the finished article now. We can't wait for Brennan Johnson to see if he wants to develop. At the end of the day, we can sit here and say it's down to coaching. I'm telling you now, it's not. It's down to the individual wanting to be out there and prove. When Harry Kane was younger and all the way through, how many stories did you hear about him being out there, finishing, doing this, doing that, working on his game? You never hear that from, the likes of Brennan Johnson and stuff like that. And that's where it comes down onto the individual. We can sit here and say it's down to coaching, but the reality is the fact that he's got 16 goals in this system, you'd have to actually praise Ange Postecoglou for that to a large degree. The fact that he's getting so much out of Brennan Johnson, despite me thinking he's average and many of the fan base thinking he's average. I would argue that maybe Ange sets up to his strengths, which again, I don't think is a good indictment. The fact that everyone else does the creative work, Johnson, you just get in at the right place, the right time. But if we really want to go where we want to go, which is winning trophies, we have to understand he has to be able to assist. He has to be able to take on his players. He has to be able to cross the ball. He has to be able to put in a through ball. He has to be able to control the ball a lot better than what he's shown this season. There's so much more to his game that he needs to add. And I'd argue if we brought in a much better right winger, we wouldn't even be having this conversation today. Because the bars are so clear. But the reality is we should not say what Brennan Johnson doing is good enough and rest on them laurels. If we want to go and match our ambitions, we need much more from this guy, and it's as simple as that.
I think I would have far less criticism for the guy. I know I've criticized the lack of creativity a lot, but where I actually get more frustrated with him is just the lack of work rate off of the ball, really. I think he is the laziest player in this whole team off of the ball. People were praising him, for his work rate against Southampton. I still don't even think it was that significant, to be honest. I think it was just a slight improvement off of what we normally see from the guy, who's just kind of lazily just sort of tracks his way back, picks and chooses when to track back, doesn't seem to ever really do it for the team or anything, and very much seems to conserve his energy. I've even made jokes on some of my Strava runs that I'm actually convinced that I could run probably a 10K much faster than this guy, because I don't believe he actually has the work rate to really be able to get up and down the pitch like you see a lot of wingers. I've said to Dave before, if he was more like a Dirk Kuyt, for times past, like, Liverpool, someone who maybe lacked a little bit on the technical side of things, but made up for it in terms of the work rate. People even said that Jacob Murphy in the chat is better than him. Jacob Murphy probably doesn't get that much criticism because he does work his tail off for the team. And I think Brennan Johnson would get far less criticism from people like me if he, of course, contributing the goals, can't say anything about it. He's doing his job. He's doing his part in that area. But if he was helping out Pedro Porro, getting stuck in, working his way up and down to help the team, both on and off the ball, I don't think I would be nearly as critical of him. Of course, I would say, you know what, when he isn't scoring goals, like what does he really contribute? Is he actually, creating, stuff, for players on the right wing? Maybe not, but at least I can't fault the effort. I can't fault, the guy for not helping out his teammates. I do find that he is, of all the forward players, works the least hard. Even I'd say works less hard than Sonny, even in my opinion. And Sonny, we know, is 32, 33 years of age, and I think would probably have more of an excuse not to work as hard as others. James Maddison, for example, someone who I don't think has ever been that renowned really for a guy that works that hard, off of the ball. I think he's shown a lot of improvement in that area, especially this season, probably since being criticized by Spurs fans, as well as probably maybe even being dropped, so many times by Ange Postecoglou. I think James Maddison's made a big improvement in getting stuck in and helping out the team defensively. For me, with Brennan Johnson, if he just works on that this summer, gets back into maybe, I think it's just a shape thing. I think he just doesn't, I don't think he's is as good a shape as maybe other players to be able to work his way up and down. Sometimes it is just a willingness, kind of just a want, but a lot of players that are able to just work their way up and down usually are just in peak shape to be able to do that. And in my opinion, I just don't think he is. He doesn't strike me as a guy that's, doing extra runs off of the pitch, getting on the treadmill to sort of help himself, be able to do that. And he seems to pick and choose his moments when to run really hard and when to sort of work his way up and down. And it seems to be mostly when there's an opportunity to score. So fair play to the guy, right? He just knows and sees the game, in a good enough way to do that. But like I said, I just don't think I'd be nearly as critical of him if he worked his tail off. And Dave knows that. I usually do show a lot of praise for players that do work hard for the team, because me, myself, being a Yank and not being a very good footballer, I take a lot of value in that. Players that maybe know they're not as technically skilled as the other guys in the team, but then make up for it by just being hard workers and being unselfish players. And for me, I find him defensively to be probably the most selfish player we have in this 25-man squad. I don't think anyone works less hard than this guy.
Look, when Bellamy done the breakdown on Sky Sports as well, I think you're absolutely spot on with the working hard. I think, Bellamy alluded to that there, at the end of the breakdown, there's so much that this kid else needs to bring to his game. But, when you look at the breakdown, all of his goals are inside the box. He doesn't do anything outside the box. And that's where the biggest frustration comes in as well. As you say, Jack, out of possession, Tottenham has always notoriously been a working class club. It's in a working class area. The bare minimum that Spurs fans expect if you're represented in the area is fucking hard work. And I'm sorry, that's one thing we should never, ever give a player a free pass on. But when it comes to Brennan Johnson, and I say this in the nicest, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, he is not good enough to be a Premier League striker up front. If he wants to carve out a good career for himself at this level, he has to adapt his game and learn to become a right winger. We can sit here and say he's not a right winger. Let's play 4-4-2. No one's coming in here and playing 4-4-2. The days of two up front is gone. I would love to get back to 4-4-2. I enjoyed that era, but it's gone. The reality is, and no manager's going to walk in here and pick him over Solanke or over the striker options that we have. They're never going to see that in him. So it is up to him now to prove that he can adapt and he can become a right winger. Does he deserve time to do it? Yes. But it is on him to recognize that and to do that. I'm sure there's people telling them that. I'm sure the fact that he's been playing right wing ever since we've signed him, I'm sure that's been highlighted to him to a large degree, and I think it's on him. But I would argue as well, we can sit here and happy clap the 16 goals and pretend that's enough. But as fans, we were talking about this earlier. If he was in a Real Madrid team just doing that alone off the right wing, he would be slaughtered by the media, by the fan base and everything else. It wouldn't be tolerated. Yeah. And we have to get to that point at Tottenham. We can say, yes, you're good at this, but there's more to this. There's more to football than just being good in one aspect. You're in a position where you need to do multiple things. You start doing it or you're out. It's that simple. That's the sort of culture we need to develop. What he's doing at Tottenham, we sit here and we debate whether it's good enough or not. The reality is, at any other club, they go, thanks for the goals, but you don't assist, you don't beat your man on, you don't track back, you don't muck in for the team, out you fucking go. And that's our problem at Tottenham Hotspur. We need to start developing these sort of standards.
Work rate goes a long way with me, and if he just improved that for next season, I don't think I would be nearly as critical of the guy. I think that would go a long way with me if he just improved that aspect, and that's really within your control. Like, that's just a fitness thing. That's just like a willingness thing. That's not like, improving your creativity is more on your technical skills, on your ability to be able to sort of manipulate the ball, see the game a bit differently. Like, that would take a lot of work for him to improve
But
in
the
that
thing
area.
is,
But like fitness, just stamina, willpower, that can easily be changed. That can be changed quite quickly, in fact. So that's what I'm looking forward to him improving on next
but the
season. And
thing
then
is,
I did have a question on will we start him Thursday night for both of you as
just
well?
before we get into that quickly, like we can sit here and say, "Oh, it's down to coaching." At the end of the day, the coach can tell them what he needs to do. They can put drills in place for him to do it and stuff like that. But if he doesn't have the ability at speed to be able to whip the ball in or take one touch, whip that ball in consistently, or he's not, and if he doesn't, and he's not out there putting balls out on the deck, just practicing that outside, he's never going to have that ability, no matter how much coaching, no matter how much people try and guide him in the right direction. That's what all coaches can do at the end of the day. They can guide you and they can say, this is what you need to do. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to practice. Even when outside of your coaches, eyes outside of what the manager is to do, it's up to you to practice that. And if he's not willing to do that, then he's never, ever going to adapt, no matter the coaching.
Two things for you, Sam. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that the biggest criticism you can have for Brennan is he's not got any footballing IQ. And I think that he kind of epitomizes, for me at least, the sort of common thought train nowadays that like there's no longer like flair players and there's no creative thinking from players. It's all system based. And I feel like Brennan needs to be told by his manager to do this stuff, get in the gym, do this, do that. He's his role models in the club are Son and Maddison. I'm not shitting on those players, but these are your prima donna kind of players,
Diva
right?
type
At the
players,
moment,
yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
And they're not. I look at Bergvall, for example. He's looking at someone like Decky, who's got a monster mentality, and he's we hear Ange saying they're both in the gym 24/7 when they're not doing
Right.
actual training, and I just don't see Brennan having that thought cross his mind, and that's not to say that he's not working hard with the stuff that he is doing, but he's not working hard to improve the stuff that he's not, which is the point that you're making, Dave. And I think you're being a little bit harsh about his out of possession stuff. But I wouldn't say.
Do you know what, Sam? The reason why I bring it up, right? I watched back Gareth Bale against Inter Milan and teams like that. That guy tracked back. He was in the box, getting his head on things at the back post, blocking shots and stuff like that. And I'm not being funny, but if he can do that, then there's no excuse for Brennan Johnson not to do that.
But he was a left back, though, Dave. I'm not. I'm
right,
not
but when he's playing Inter Milan, he was playing left wing. But at that point,
I know,
he was
but I'm
ripping
saying
teams apart. But he never turned around and goes, "I'm too good to do that." He mucked in for the team because winning meant more to him than anything else.
Yeah, no, look, I'm not disputing that Brennan should be doing more, but I think it comes down to a system thing, and I'll bang this drum until there's nothing left to bang. You're basically like, I think we all understand that Brennan and Porro like doesn't really work. They don't complement each other, especially as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream about midfielders. The midfielders don't offer the protection needed. So basically, and you see it every game, and that's why we concede the same goal every game or every other game, because you basically defend with one person down that side. There's no filling in when needed, and that's not just Brennan. That's the right-sided midfielder as well, in my opinion, as well as the right-sided centre back. But we haven't really.
I'll be honest though. I see Udabur and Son back more down that left-hand side helping out.
I'm not sure about Odegaard.
Honestly,
that's one of the things I actually criticize Odegaard about, his defensive, like. He just kind of I don't know. He doesn't do enough for me, Odegaard, and I just sort of about the I think when Johnny left, he said about starting Odegaard over Johnson in the game. I actually think that Odegaard should come on. I think that Johnson has done enough in the last game to say that he should start personally.
Okay.
And because I actually don't think that Odegaard, since he had that really good game when he came back, he scored 2 against whoever it was at Alkmaar. I actually don't think he's been great. I don't think he's been bad, but I don't think he's offered anywhere near enough. And he's been a figure that's kind of divided the group chat recently. People saying in the game, I can't remember what game it was, but one of the games we played recently, someone was saying that he was our best player and he was doing loads, going up and down the wing, and that Son had been terrible.
Chelsea,
but for me, I was looking at it that Son had created more with the minimal amount of touches than Odegaard had, and he'd seen the ball the most out of any player in our team. So for me, I think that Odegaard's still a bit too raw to be starting on a game of that magnitude. As much as Brennan's got his faults, I think he deserves to start personally.
Fair.
I think Dave's in the same boat. I think he wants to see Johnson start on the right. Yeah,
I think Johnson deserves it. And look, no matter my criticism of Johnson, I think we're at the point where we're that void of goals. We need him in the team. But again, it's not a good indictment. It's not a great indictment of Tottenham Hotspur, but that we're relying on this guy. This is what makes me absolutely mad, Jack, is people said we're too over-reliant on Harry Kane. Now we're reliant on Brennan Johnson. I know who I would want to be more reliant on. You know what I mean? And this is what absolutely infuriates me. But the reality is the guy's scoring goals. You got to play him against Frankfurt. The reality is we need to go and score goals. I think the argument should be maybe potentially Odegaard over Son. I think that's maybe more the question heading into this game. Look, I do think that Odegaard works harder than Brennan Johnson. You go back and look at that Chelsea game. He's back there helping Spence all night long. I do think he works hard defensively and stuff like that. But I think that's where the debate comes in. Obviously, any manager's always going to pick Son, hoping that he just has that strike in him, because no matter how bad Son has been, he always has that in his locker. So Son will play. They will be your 2 wingers on the Thursday night. It will be Son off the left and it will be Johnson off the right. Look, I agree with Sam, I think maybe in terms of when Odegaard has got the ball, I think what lit our eyes up against Man City is that he took the game to them. When he's got the ball in recent weeks or recent games, maybe he has been a little bit more hesitant, and the fact that Postecoglou sort of said he wasn't too happy with Odegaard when he brought him on against Southampton. He didn't exactly do what he wants to do. I think also alludes to that he will be on the bench Thursday night.
The ironic thing is that the 2 strikers we have, Richarlison and Solanke, probably work 2 times harder than any of the wingers that we really have, available. But you can't play both of them at the same time. And also, the strikers are the ones who are more responsible for scoring the goals, anyway. So that's kind of a conundrum that we find ourselves with. Yeah.
That feeds into your point about what you were saying about Brennan. Solanke hasn't scored nearly enough goals, but it's getting overlooked because of how hard he's working for the team.
Fair
and
point.
Obviously, we all saw the.
Well, it would help if the right winger could set him up with a few.
100%. But we all saw that, regardless of the fact that he's not scoring, those 2 months that he was out were like some of the worst months of the season. And as soon as he came back, you saw what we were missing. Having that focal point and someone working that hard up front.
And Dave, has only he's taken a long time to start, bringing up the donkey jokes, with Solanke, probably because, the work rate has been praised, so much and has covered up for.
Well, I feel for him about that.
Like you said, Sam, maybe work rate covers up for a lot of fans. It does cover up a lot, it can, it goes a long way with fans. And I think Johnson would do himself a massive favor if he did that. Sorry, Dave, though.
No, it's also, I just feel for Solanke in terms of the creativity. Look, we don't create him an awful lot. Look, my big argument now is sort of like he should be doing a lot better with some of the half chances we create for him. I see strikers, get these half chances and put them away. He doesn't. But look, it just goes back to I just never thought the quality we were bringing in this front line was ever good enough in the first place. And I think to a large degree, I've sort of been proven right. Brennan Johnson is the first Tottenham player to hit 10 goals this season in the Premier League. It's absolutely shocking. I know fans at the time when we were selling Harry Kane wanted the goals spread around. we've clearly done that. But like I tried to highlight, you still need one or two players, up there in your 15, 20 goals a season to help carry that, But look, this is where we are at right now. I'll be honest. I just think these arguments about Solanke, Johnson, Richarlison, honestly, I just think it's a really bad indictment of the recruitment we've made with the Harry Kane money, to be quite frank with you. The fact that we're arguing about bang average players, whether they're good enough or not. The reality is they're bang fucking average.
As we wrap things up here, everybody, just a couple of things to mention. We do reserve time at the end of these shows to answer the members' questions. There's a lot of them to get through, so thank you guys. And also, if you did want to have any of your questions or thoughts answered at the end of the show, feel free to become a member. If you're a member and you didn't know about that, something to look out for. We post it in the community section for all of you guys to look at, and as well as give us your thoughts. And then also after this, if you want to join us, you can watch the Champions League with us, Real Madrid and Arsenal, as well as the Bayern and Inter game. You can join us for that. Chat about anything that we've discussed today, talk about the game that's in front of us, or talk about any sort of feelings you might have Thursday night. You would help us out a ton as well if you followed us over there, especially if you are going to be watching the Champions League this evening. But let's get into this one. We have some questions to get through from our lovely members. Dean Coxey saying, if we lose tomorrow and play bad, if you was in charge, would you pull the plug on Ange before the second leg and try and get a new manager bounce for the second leg and the rest of the season? I mean, if someone wants to come in on this after me, they can, but I might answer this one. I say if we lose badly tomorrow or on Thursday night, I mean, like, do you really expect just then another manager to come in and somehow salvage it and rescue it? That just seems like a ridiculous ask, of that manager. Perhaps, though, like if it really were that atrocious and that poor, maybe then you do start to already think about the interim manager, kind of kicking the feet up and sort of beach riding for the rest of the season. Dave and I have made no secrets of that. We've said, if it does go poorly against Frankfurt in the Europa League and we do get knocked out, they probably will look to bring in maybe an interim manager for the rest of the year. But I don't even know if an interim would be able to salvage, let's say a 3-0 deficit or something like that. That just seems like a tall order. So that's my thoughts on that, unless anybody disagreed on that or had something to say there. Ryan Trestaine saying, big up panel. If we played counterattacking football away in the second leg, could we win it? And last of all, why has Ange been given all this time? I think we've answered the latter part, for a few reasons. Ryan, we've said, part of it, and I'll bring this point up, whether you like it or not, I think Daniel Levy has kept Ange Postecoglou in charge because he knows the moment that Ange does go, or if he does go, all the knives will be sharpened and will be pinpointed towards Daniel Levy. So he's been it's a scapegoat, and it's also just a cover up for where we know the deeper problems lie, and that's with the ownership and with the people upstairs. So Ange Postecoglou right now takes more of the pressure away from people like Daniel Levy for the time being. And to be honest, he's not going to play a counterattacking approach. Maybe he might in the second leg or something like that, like you could be alluding to, but he's not going to make that many dramatic changes to the style, really.
Look, this is the thing, right? We can sit here and say we want to play counterattacking football. We're not good enough to play counterattacking football, sit in for deep periods and defend for long periods. I'm just being brutally honest. We ain't good enough to play like that. Even when we had other players that you would maybe argue it suited more, with Jose and Conte, we still couldn't play like that. The reality is we don't have a good enough back line, and we haven't for a long time since Pochettino to play counter-attacking football. There's no point. You are only setting yourself up for defeats. And we can sit here and talk about counter-attacking football. We sacked 3 managers for playing that way because it didn't produce results. So the reality is, we are where we are right now. We just got to try and play out from the back, try and keep possession. I'd argue that's the way to go about it. Keep possession. Don't do any stupid mistakes. If you are seeing a press come on you, just put it down the line. Make sure you've already told your winger. Get straight after it. Put pressure on them further up the field that way. Be smart. But we could sit here and say counter-attack football. Let's be honest. Sack 3 managers playing it, and we can't do it anyway. We're just shit.
And then for Dr. Evil Sam, what are your thoughts on Ange cupping his ears and then lying about it twice?
First of all, I feel like I am looking a bit more evil today because I shaved my beard off and I've just kept my mustache. So I'll accept that one. I think that personally, Ange has never fully recovered from his comments about the Man City game when fans were unsure as to whether they wanted to win or lose the game based on Arsenal winning the league. I think that he's since come back and said, "Oh, I got it wrong," but I don't think he fully believes that. I think he just realizes that the tide is turning on him, and that the fans were clearly and still clearly are very annoyed about that. I think that Ange annoys me because, in a sense, he takes the focus away from the football, which maybe is not the worst thing given how things are going at the moment. But I just feel like, and it's not necessarily all his fault, because I think, as I discussed with you, Jack, in that pre-record, I think the media are out to get him a little bit.
Yeah.
100%. But you're a self-proclaimed happy clapper. You've taken that word and you use it as a badge of honor. I think another happy clapper is Alistair Gold, right? And Ali Gold
don't like to be grouped with him, but I know what you mean.
No, I like
kidding,
Ali Gold, man. But he obviously people say he's a club shill and blah blah blah. But I like Ali Gold. I don't really have anything bad to say about him. But in his last video, he was talking about how, basically, why would you do that? The whole cup in the ear thing. It makes no sense. And when I first saw it on Twitter, I put it into the group chat to say, apparently Ange cupped his ear to the fans. And 8 out of the 10 people in the group chat that saw the message were like, nah, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Because people are genuinely in disbelief that things could be going so badly, as bad as we've been this season and parts of last season, and he's doing that to the fans. I get it, they're booing you for your decisions, and it's hard, but it's also hypocritical to say the fans can think what they want, no one can tell the fans how to feel, and then to cup your ears and wave to the fans to say what you're saying now. It didn't sit right with me, and personally that to me, of everything, is the final straw, and I would want him gone.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said there, and maybe he did the damage even before the cupping of the ears. Let's say Ange does get sacked. Do you think he'll actually retire? He's never lost his job before, and you can tell he likely didn't expect it to be this difficult. Technically, he lost his job, I believe, in the Australia job, so he has lost a job before. But I'd argue, I think you might be on mute there, Dave, but I'd argue that I think he will, out of spite, probably take on another job of some kind, like a lot of Spurs managers have, to maybe prove a point. Whether he does or not, will remain to be seen. But we've seen other managers sort of take on another job eventually and then do very, very well after Spurs. So I wonder if Ange would go down a similar path. And he says, for Jack, a fellow German football enjoyer, what are your thoughts on Dino Topmüller? While he may have the better players, I wouldn't even say he does have a ton of better players, but he does have some good players. His style of play is a complete mismatch, and they have the advantage in the tactics area. Wouldn't necessarily say they have the advantage in the tactics area. I just think they play a different brand of football to us. Personally, as you know, Artist T, I lean towards more defensive counterattacking approach anyways. That's just the way I kind of like the game, because I think it can often be made a lot simpler that way. And if you do have inferior players, sometimes it is a good way to go about things, to be defensively secure and then look to sort of take advantage of the space left in behind by the opposition team if they try to get deep into your half. With Topmüller, I think he's shown that he is a good coach. I think he's worse than Oliver Glasner, personally. That's just my take on things. And I don't even think Oliver Glasner is like a top level manager or anything. I think he's a good manager. I don't think he's a top level elite manager. I would lean more towards Sebastian Hoeneß, at Stuttgart, but he struggled this year with handling European football as well as the domestic campaign. But if we were to go for another attack-minded manager, which I think Spurs should do, I think fans complained about not having attacking football. I think they would again, with another manager if they didn't have attacking football. So if I were to go for another German coach, I would go for Sebastian Hoeneß before I would go for Dino Topmüller. But no disrespect to Dino, I think he is a good manager, and I'd actually disagree with you. I think he probably has probably technically an inferior squad to what Spurs have for the most part. But this one for you, Dave. I disagree with one of your takes on Weird Time TV. You there wouldn't be, or something. You think fans? You think wouldn't be fans pressure? I'm not sure. Maybe you just meant something different. We struggle or lose 5 out of the 10 games next season if Ange gets there. More than likely, that includes our mid-table rivals, aid relegation fodder. So I think he'd get slammed for it and be back on the hot seat. Always usually very good with the grammar, artist T, but for some reason, maybe I'm struggling with reading that one. So Dave, tell me what you think.
No, look, first of all, everyone disagrees with me, but, I'd probably say the right thing just at the wrong time. But, it is what it is, part and parcel of the game. But look, I think from the fans, there'll be pressure, maybe, yeah. But I think if he wins the Europa League, I do think many people, he'd be the most successful manager since, the 80s, since 84, since we last done it. And whether people like it or not, the club ain't going to sack him off the back of it. I think there's more chance he walks away and resigns than the club sacking him if he wins the Europa League, to be quite honest with you. And I think, therefore, many people have to go, do you know what? I've been proven wrong. We all place the trophy demands. Everyone whips him about saying he's going to win it in the second year. If he does, then people have to give him a chance, and I think then you do look deeper into the injuries and everything else and all that sort of stuff. But I also think, there won't be anywhere near as much pressure from the media, the journals and all that sort of stuff if he wins. They'll give him time. The pundits will start speaking about giving him time and everything else, I think, and then that will, in my opinion, to a large degree, ease down, some of the fan base to a certain degree on the guy. That's just my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong. If he didn't win it and he was continued to straight into next season and he wasn't winning games straight off the bat, 100%, fans would be screaming and more going ballistic, and rightly so. But if he does win that Europa League, I just think that the pressure is a bit different. Look, I don't think we're going to win the Europa League. I hope we do. I wish we do. I pray for it every day. They've opened up a new boat route from Rosslare straight into the Basque region. I'm there if we get there. But the reality is, if he does, I just think, everyone calms down a little bit. The reason why fans are so angst up and worked up is because we want to win trophies. We bring in managers, we sack them off the basis, or fans get mad at them off the basis of not winning trophies. We can say this season, it's about winning games, but the reality is it's about winning trophies. We know that. Let's not kid ourselves. And if he wins a trophy, then I think, there won't be as much pressure next season. I think it will appease a lot of the fans.
Also, sorry for, reading your questions maybe poorly at certain points, Artist T. I do actually, by the way, have a slight eye condition where sometimes I only read with one eye. So I'm often actually guessing the words that I'm reading in front of me. Last question, what's everyone's meal plan? But also for Dave and Sam, what was for lunch? For me, I'm going to have, again, some more spicy soup to clear out this cold and this sickness at the moment. It worked pretty well last time, yesterday evening, but I need another one, I think, to really clear things out. At the moment, my head doesn't feel very stuffy, but my nose still feels pretty stuffy. So I'm sounding even more yank and boring than usual. So I definitely need that soup in me. Dinner plans, everybody?
I think my missus is making burgers, so I'm going to have burgers.
Oh, yeah. Love to hear that.
When we're doing the big upstream, you'll hear the sizzling in the background so people can get in there.
Make us all hungry.
Bacon parmies and stuff like that they were doing the other day.
Sam, any dinner plans for you this evening?
Come on, guys. It's Tuesday. It's fish fingers or actually, I think it's crispy, chunky cod. And for lunch, I actually went a bit rogue today. I had it was a lettuce wrap, but it was filled with like prawn cocktail and a bunch of like tomatoes and stuff. It was very healthy, actually.
That does sound healthy. Me, myself, I'll try to be healthy, but I just need to get rid of this little sickness. Shem Tan saying, if we lose the first leg on Thursday, does Ange stay or go? I guess we kind of answered that earlier. I don't think he does. I think they're just going to give him every chance in the Europa League. And then after it, they'll make the decision.
100%. I think, there's a week between the games. I think, he sees out that. And then if we don't, I think if we don't get through coming out the away leg, I think Friday morning he's gone.
What is the most important idea or concept we should focus on for the reason? I think he means of the poor season, I would assume.
I think he means for the rest of the season.
For the rest of the season, we should focus on for the rest of the season. I think we should be looking at trying to bring in some type of experience for this campaign, whether Ange stays here or not. We have enough talent to work with. We have enough talent to pick from. What Spurs, I feel like, are truly lacking in are experienced, proven players in various areas of the pitch. I think especially up front for the most part, but then maybe also a bit in midfield. So for me, I think the recruitment really is a big focus for this summer, personally. Unless anybody can add anything to that while we wrap things up, and we're about 5 minutes away from going over to the big upstream. Sam, I'll put your Twitter into the chat. Dave, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just quickly. What does it mean? What is the most important idea or concept we should focus on for the
rest of the season,
in your opinion? Scoring goals. You score goals, you win games of football. Reality is the amount of games we've lost by 1 goal this season. Well, if we had someone like Harry Kane or someone of decent quality up front, when we had Harry Kane, he put them points on the board. It masked over a lot of the quality, stuff like that. The reality is we've always conceded goals at Tottenham Hotspur. The only time in my lifetime where we didn't have a leaky backline to a large degree was under Pochettino. The rest of my time, we've always conceded goals. Since Pochettino, under Jose, Nuno, Conte, we conceded goals. But the reality is we scored a shed load. We don't have that difference maker right now. So for me, just score goals and make my football exciting.
Super Spurs, sorry, I didn't see it earlier, but I gave it a refresh, and now I do. Panel, we all had the rumors about a supposed Qatari takeover about 4 weeks back. Seems to have all died down now. PR stunt, deflection, or do you feel that there is still some truth to those rumors? Would love your thoughts. I'm a little divided on it. I think it suited Daniel Levy for those rumors to come out at that time. It seemed very suspicious that they came out immediately when the pressure again was on him. But then also at the same time, it feels like, the road is coming to an end with Daniel Levy. Like everyone is becoming more and more and more Levy out, Enoch out, and putting the pressure on him that you would probably benefit him to actually have some real substance behind those. And he didn't mention it in the financial reports. Is that because potentially there is maybe something going to be happening this summer? I don't know. We've been on the fence with a lot of things tonight. Rightfully so. There's a lot of gray area with plenty of the questions and stuff we've talked about, but this is one I'm truly on the fence of. I can't tell whether it was a deflection, or whether there is actually something on the cards here. Would anyone lean one way or the other on this?
Have a lot of reports before that not being that they have no interest in a takeover. They want minority investment, right? Isn't that what a lot of the reports have been? And I think, look, maybe to a degree maybe he has struck it. I think it's gone on long enough. We've seen many different names. I think minority investment, he has a really good chance of getting complete takeover with the money he's asking for. And I think no matter what he gets offered, he's going to up the price anyway. It's going to become unrealistic. I think, minority investment, I think there's a chance he's got it done. I think takeover, I'm not quite so sure. Look, I'm not an expert on it, but I'm just not quite sure it's ever going to be a full takeover.
Yeah, look, I think I think that we discussed it last week or the week before. I think that there was truth in the rumors, and my point from last week was basically that, as Dave said, I think Levy's demands are just too unrealistic, and people think, okay, now's the time to come in and try and take over Spurs while they're on the decline, and whether it's the money or whether it's the fact that Levy has said on countless occasions that he wants to still be the chairman of the club if someone takes over. I feel like, why would you take over the club if you still can't really you haven't really got the power to actually be the driving force of the club? You're still having to kind of answer to Levy, and
some would argue that Levy works off maybe the Enoch directive, and that if you were to get in another ownership, that he will be there, maybe kept for the business side of things. But if they're working off their directive, and if they have the ambition, then it could work out. I don't know.
But I think as well, sort of to build on that as well, we said last week about the Enoch tentacles and all the infrastructure around the club that Levy's invested in. I wonder if that is kind of separate from the club, that's not under the umbrella of Tottenham Hotspur, but that's under the umbrella of Enoch and Levy, and that's kind of only becoming apparent to these superpowers after they've come in to start doing discussions where it's like, okay, let's say that they want 4 billion for the club, but they want 8 billion to have an investment in all the stuff around the club, and that it's less likely that someone comes in and offers that because, or even offers for the club because they don't want to have to pay that much, as you say.
Yeah. Well,
Sam,
look,
fantastic as always, sir. Can you give yourself a plug? And thanks for, again, being here and being a regular on these panel shows. And thank you, sir, as always. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
No worries, guys. It's always a pleasure to be on. As these lovely gentlemen have kindly put my Twitter in the comments, feel free to follow me over there. You can find me here on Tuesdays. You can find me blasting music at ridiculous decibels, driving down the embankment on my way home from work around 5:30. Looking fresh behind the wheel. And yeah, I'll be at the game on Thursday. I sit in the West Stand in the 5th floor. So if you see me around, feel free to say hi. And I think ultimately we all just want the best for the club.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just frustrated, and maybe I'll reiterate my point from earlier on, that it's like I don't feel proud to be a Spurs fan at the moment, and that is killing me because I love the club. I give up my time every week to come and do these shows, and I wouldn't change it, but I would change what we have to discuss every week almost. So if we can somehow steal a march to the Europa League final and get into the Champions League, then I'll be happy, and I'll reassess kind of how I feel about Ange. At the moment, I'm a little bit more not wanting Ange to even be there regardless of the Europa League, but you never know how you feel when
you win it, you'll feel different.
Yeah, look, hopefully, I don't dislike Ange. That's the thing.
No, I know. You never have. You don't agree with the football and stuff, but that's totally different. You know what I mean? Than being personally disliking the guy and stuff. But look, I want to say a massive thank you to yourself and Johnny. We really appreciate your time and commitment to this every Tuesday, Sam. Big yourself up. But guys, we do have to end it there. We do have to get over to big up. We are going to watch Real Madrid versus Arsenal, also Inter and whoever they're playing as well. They're going to be the two games. We'll be sort of watching them simultaneously. I'll more have my eye on Madrid. I like watching Madrid. I think they're class. Everything they do is classy, and they always find a way to do it. So, if you do find yourself sitting down watching the Champions League and you want to come on and join us, watch the Champions League with us, and look, we can talk about whatever you want. If you just want to get to know myself and Jack a bit better, feel free to come on. If you want to spark a conversation about Tottenham, feel free to come on. You just click on the link, brings you in. It's all free. Click join stage. Jack will bring you on, and then we can sit there and have a great chat. And the best thing is you don't even have to have your camera on if you don't want to. Yeah. Just come on, have a chat, vibe out with us. But look, guys, that's it. We are going to end here. I really appreciate all you guys at home for tuning in. Really appreciate all you members who got your questions in. And then also Faz Radfire, Spurs Fans TV, or the Blaine Devlin, Phil P, and also PH family. Really appreciate the support, guys. Look, supporting Tottenham is hard right now, but we have a massive game to get up for Thursday. Let's get behind the boys. It could be our last home European tie. It is the first time we've reached this stage since the Champions League final under Pochettino. Let's get behind it. And anyone that wants to come in and comment underneath and say you're negative, you're more than welcome. But I would prefer some constructive criticism in the comments next time. And by the way, start getting them in because we will be reacting to your comments very, very soon. Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, sláinte.
See you soon, everybody. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on,
and also see you on Big Up. Please join us over there. We'll see you very shortly.
Boss, thank you very much, Sam.